The knock didn't sound like a knock. It sounded like violence. A heavy thud against my front door, followed by another, louder one, rattling the frame hard enough to wake both me and the dogs instantly. I shot upright in bed, heart racing, the digital clock glowing 4:07 a.m. in the dark. Before I could even reach for my phone, the third impact came, this time unmistakably a kick. The K9s were already moving. Low growls turned into sharp, controlled barking, the kind trained dogs give when they sense a real threat. Not panic. Warning. I slipped on boots, grabbed the flashlight, and moved toward the hallway, every sense on edge. No one visits at 4 a.m. unless something is wrong. Then I heard her voice through the door. Open up. HOA. Not an introduction. Not a request. A command. She kicked the door again, harder, and the handle rattled violently. You can't lock me out, she shouted. I have a master key. That sentence landed heavier than the kicks. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a noise complaint or a late-night welfare check. This was entitlement armed with confidence. The kind that assumes compliance before permission. I stopped a few feet from the door, staying silent, letting the K9s barking echo through the house. They were holding position exactly as trained, behind me, controlled, ready. Through the peephole, I saw her clearly under the porch light. HOA president. Clipboard gone. Hair pulled tight. Jaw clenched. One hand raised to kick again, the other gripping a key ring like a badge of authority. No police. No backup. Just her alone, convinced she belonged on the other side of my door. She kicked again. Open this door right now, she yelled. HOA rules require access. You don't get to block me. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear. Disbelief. She wasn't just trespassing, she was attempting forced entry at night, under the assumption that her title protected her. I pulled out my phone and started recording, keeping the lens low, but steady. I spoke calmly through the door. Step away from my property. You are trespassing. She laughed. Actually laughed. You can't trespass on HOA property, she snapped. We have a master key for emergencies. This is an inspection. An inspection. At 4 a.m. With kicks. The dogs surged forward at the sound of her raised voice, barking louder now, deeper, vibrating the walls. That finally gave her pause. She hesitated, took a step back, then leaned forward again, peering through the glass panel. Control your animals, she shouted. If they touch me, you'll be liable. That was the moment everything crystallized. She wasn't afraid. She believed she was untouchable. That HOA authority erased private property, erased common sense, erased the law. She raised her foot again. I hit the porch lights. The sudden brightness made her flinch. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flash across her face, not because of me, but because she could now clearly see the dogs behind the door. Big. Focused. Not bluffing. I spoke again, louder this time. Last warning. Step off my porch. Police are being called. She scoffed. Go ahead. I'll tell them you refused HOA access. She turned slightly, as if already rehearsing the story. That's when I realized this wasn't the beginning of her plan. It was the middle, and she had made one critical mistake. She assumed the door was the only thing standing between her and control. She forgot what was guarding it. She didn't step away. Instead, she reached down and slid one of the keys from her ring, holding it up to the porch light like proof. See, she said loudly. Master key. HOA issued. You're required to allow entry. Her confidence was almost impressive, the kind that comes from years of people backing down before things get real. I stayed silent, letting the recording continue. The dogs shifted again, nails clicking softly on the floor as they repositioned themselves. They weren't lunging. They weren't out of control. They were watching, alert, responding to tone and posture exactly as trained. That seemed to irritate her more than the barking. She bent toward the lock. That's when I called 911. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten. I simply stepped back, put the phone to my ear, and spoke quietly while she tested keys on my door. The dispatcher answered, and I gave my address, then described the situation as plainly as possible: an individual attempting forced entry, claiming authority, refusing to leave, kicking the door, occurring at 4 in the morning. As if on cue, the wrong key scraped uselessly in the lock. She cursed under her breath and tried another, then another. Each failure chipped away at her certainty. She glanced at the door camera, then back at the lock, then over her shoulder, as if suddenly aware of how exposed she was. "You don't need to do this," she said, voice tight. "You're escalating." I almost laughed at that. Instead, I spoke clearly so the dispatcher could hear. "She's still attempting entry." The dogs barked again, louder now, responding to her rising agitation. She stepped back abruptly, nearly tripping on the porch step. For the first time, her bravado cracked completely. "Call them off," she snapped. "This is harassment. Step away from the door," I replied evenly. She didn't. She paced instead, waving the key ring like a weapon, talking faster now. She claimed complaints. Emergency access. Structural concerns. She said neighbors were afraid. She said she had the right. Each excuse tumbled out over the next, unraveling into noise. When the dispatcher asked if the person was still on the property, I said yes. When asked if I felt threatened, I paused, then answered honestly. Yes. That word changed everything. Red and blue lights arrived faster than I expected, washing the front of the house in color. She froze mid-sentence, eyes wide, keys clattering as her grip loosened. The dogs went silent on command, shifting back instantly. Control matters in moments like that. 2 officers approached the porch cautiously. One addressed her first, asking what was going on. She launched into her story immediately, painting herself as a responsible official denied access by a hostile homeowner with dangerous animals. She never mentioned the kicking, never mentioned the keys in the lock, never mentioned the time. The second officer listened to me next. I showed them the video without commentary. Just let it play. The kicks, the shouting, the master key claim, the attempted entry, the timestamp glowing on the screen. The change was immediate. They asked her to step off the porch, then further, then to the sidewalk. Her protests grew shrill. She insisted on her authority. She demanded they enforce HOA rules. One officer cut her off calmly and asked a single question. "Do you have written consent or a warrant to enter this residence?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then said no. The citation was written quietly. Trespassing. Attempted unlawful entry. Disturbing the peace. She stared at the paper like it was a personal insult. As she was escorted away, she turned once, eyes burning, and said, "This isn't over." I closed the door, locked it, and finally exhaled. She thought the K9s were the problem. They weren't. They were the warning. By morning, the story had already started mutating. Text messages buzzed my phone before sunrise, all from neighbors who had somehow heard a version of events that painted me as unstable, aggressive, and hiding something. The HOA president, apparently, hadn't slept. She'd spent the early hours emailing the board, filing reports, and reframing the night as a failed emergency inspection obstructed by a hostile homeowner and dangerous animals. What she didn't mention was the citation. By mid-morning, an official notice appeared in my inbox. An emergency HOA meeting scheduled for that afternoon. Mandatory attendance requested. Not required, but strongly implied. The wording was sharp, urgent, designed to regain momentum before facts could settle. I smiled, brewed coffee, and forwarded the email to my attorney. The meeting room was packed. More residents than I'd ever seen at one of these gatherings. Fear does that. It fills chairs. The HOA president sat at the head of the table, posture rigid, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. She launched into her account immediately, framing herself as a protector blocked from doing her duty. She spoke of master keys, emergency authority, and community safety, each phrase delivered like a shield. Then she pointed at me. She accused me of violating HOA access rules, harboring dangerous animals, and creating an unsafe environment. She implied negligence, suggested fines, even hinted at eviction proceedings. The room buzzed with murmurs. Doubt spreads quickly when spoken confidently. When she finished, I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue point by point. I simply connected my phone to the screen at the front of the room and played the video. No commentary, no edits, just sound and time. The kicks echoed through the speakers. The shouting, the phrase master key, the timestamp. The room went silent. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. The HOA president's face drained of color frame by frame. I paused the video and held up the citation. Trespassing. Attempted unlawful entry. Disturbing the peace. Then I asked one question. Can anyone here show me the HOA bylaw that authorizes forced entry at 4 a.m. without notice, consent, or law enforcement present? No one answered. The board members exchanged looks. Papers shuffled. The HOA attorney cleared his throat and asked for a brief recess. When they returned, the tone had shifted completely. Legal language replaced accusation. Liability replaced authority. The attorney explained carefully that master keys were limited to common areas only, that individual residences were explicitly excluded, that any forced entry without consent or a warrant was illegal, that the presence of trained K9s on private property was lawful and irrelevant. Then came the words the HOA president had never expected to hear. Your actions exposed the association to significant risk. The room turned on her. Not loudly. Worse. Quietly. Questions were asked. Why was she alone? Why at that hour? Why no police? Why no written notice? Each answer made things worse. Confidence collapsed into defensiveness. Authority into embarrassment. By the end of the meeting, a motion was introduced. Suspension of enforcement powers, pending investigation. Seconded immediately. Passed unanimously. She stood up, furious, and accused everyone of betrayal. No one followed her out. That afternoon, I received confirmation in writing. The HOA was prohibited from contacting me directly. All communication would go through counsel. Any attempt to approach my property would be considered harassment. The K9s lay at my feet as I read the email, calm, steady, unaware of the chaos they'd indirectly triggered. I scratched behind their ears and thought about how thin authority really is. How loud it gets right before it breaks. She came to my door expecting compliance. What she found instead was documentation, restraint, and consequences. And the realization that barking isn't the loudest sound in a power struggle. Silence is. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Once the HOA's attorney got involved, things stopped being about opinion and started being about exposure. Insurance carriers were notified. Incident reports were requested. Security footage was subpoenaed. What had been dismissed for years as overzealous enforcement suddenly had a paper trail, and that trail led straight to one person, the HOA president. She was placed on temporary administrative leave, pending review. Her access to HOA systems was revoked. No emails. No notices. No keys. The irony was sharp enough to taste. The same authority she'd tried to force through my door at 4 a.m. was now being quietly pulled out from under her. Residents started talking. Not in whispers anymore. Openly. Stories surfaced about surprise inspections, threats of fines, late-night drive-bys, and intimidation tactics no one had felt confident enough to challenge before. What happened at my door wasn't an anomaly. It was escalation. And escalation leaves fingerprints. 2 weeks later, I received another letter. This one wasn't defensive. It was corrective. The HOA board formally acknowledged that my property was a private residence with no shared access rights. They acknowledged that no master key had ever existed for individual homes. They acknowledged that the president had acted outside her authority. Every acknowledgement was a legal admission wrapped in polite language. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence did more work than any reply could have. The final meeting was closed door, but the outcome leaked within hours. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. Not suspend. Remove. Effective immediately. The justification cited abuse of authority, unauthorized actions, and conduct that exposed the association to legal liability. She didn't get a farewell email. She didn't get a statement. She didn't even get a chance to frame the narrative. One night of unchecked entitlement had undone years of posturing. A week after her removal, new signage went up around the neighborhood. Clear. Unambiguous. No HOA access beyond common areas. Updated enforcement guidelines were distributed. Training sessions scheduled. The association was forced to rebuild trust it didn't realize it had been burning. As for me, life returned to normal in the quietest way possible. The dogs went back to routine patrols. The nights went back to being dark and uneventful. No footsteps on the porch. No unexpected knocks. Just the low hum of normalcy returning. One evening, I noticed a small envelope tucked into my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. Short, nervous handwriting. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. No name. I folded it once and put it away. The truth is, situations like that only persist because people convince themselves they're alone. That pushing back will make things worse. That authority is absolute. It isn't. It's conditional. And once enough conditions are questioned, it collapses under its own weight. The K9s didn't attack anyone. They didn't need to. Their presence exposed a lie. The lie that someone could force their way into another person's home simply by claiming power. The dogs were discipline. Control. Boundaries made visible. And boundaries change everything. That night at 4 a.m. didn't end with sirens or shouting. It ended with paperwork. With timestamps. With policies being reread under legal lighting instead of ego. That's how real consequences arrive. Quietly. Permanently. She wanted access. What she created instead was a record. And records don't forget. Months later, the night still comes back to me sometimes, not as fear, but as clarity. I'll be walking past the front door, hearing nothing but the quiet hum of the house, and I'll remember how close entitlement came to crossing a line it couldn't uncross. Not because of force. Because of assumption. The HOA never contacted me again. Not a letter. Not a notice. Not a courtesy reminder. Their attorney confirmed, in writing, that any interaction with my property would require prior consent and legal justification. The master key narrative vanished overnight, scrubbed from policies like it had never existed. Power rewrites history when it loses. The neighborhood changed too. People made eye contact again. Conversations felt less guarded. A few neighbors even stopped by during daylight hours, respectful, cautious, apologetic. Not for what she did, but for what they'd tolerated. I didn't hold it against them. Fear is persuasive. Silence is easier than resistance until it isn't. The K9s became local legend in the most exaggerated way possible. Stories spread about attack dogs and near misses, none of them true. I didn't correct anyone. Letting myths grow is sometimes safer than feeding egos with facts. What mattered was that no one tested the door again. Every system relies on people believing the rules are fixed, unquestionable, absolute. But rules are just words until someone enforces them improperly. That's when the real rules show up. Laws, records, consequences. The things authority figures forget about when they're used to compliance. I never filed a lawsuit. I never demanded compensation. I didn't need to. Watching an entire structure recalibrate around one moment of documented overreach was enough. The HOA lost something far more valuable than money. It lost certainty. Once certainty cracks, control never fully recovers. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd opened the door. If I'd argued face to face. If I'd raised my voice or matched her aggression. The story would have been different. Probably messier. Probably louder. And probably easier for her to twist. Calm didn't just protect me. It trapped her in her own actions. The K9s weren't weapons. They were boundaries with heartbeats. Trained, controlled, predictable. The opposite of the chaos she brought with her. That contrast mattered. It showed everyone exactly who was acting responsibly and who wasn't. At night, when the house settles and the dogs take their positions, I sleep better than I ever did before. Not because I feel guarded, but because I know where the lines are now. They're written, recorded, respected. People like her rely on darkness, urgency, and fear. 4 a.m. was supposed to be her advantage. It became her undoing. Daylight doesn't need to shout. It just needs to exist long enough for everyone to see clearly. I still have the video saved, backed up in 3 places. I don't watch it. I don't need to. Its existence is enough. Proof isn't about replaying the moment. It's about knowing the truth can't be erased. The door is stronger now. Not physically, symbolically. It represents the line between authority and intrusion, between confidence and consequence. She tried to cross it with a key that never worked, and learned, too late, that some doors are meant to be opened by force, no matter how loudly you claim the right.